It was a gray afternoon in Paris. A light drizzle fell steadily over the quiet streets of the 14th arrondissement, soaking the sidewalks and dimming the glow of the street lamps. Moving slowly along the edge of the pavement was an elderly woman, her steps measured, guided by a cane. She wore a navy blue coat and carried a small worn leather handbag hooked over her wrist. Her name was Madame Fournier, a 78-year-old widow known in the neighborhood for her warm smile and the apple tart she sold every Sunday at the local market. That day, she had only gone out to pick up a fresh baguette from the corner bakery. Despite her age, she was proud of her independence and refused to rely on others for her daily errands. But as she turned into a narrow side street near Rue Didot, a strange feeling crept over her. Two young men in dark hoodies had been trailing behind her for several blocks. Their steps were quiet, but their hungry eyes gave away their intentions. Across the city, N'Golo Kanté had just wrapped up an informal training session with a youth football group. He often volunteered at a local charity, mentoring kids from underprivileged neighborhoods. After saying his goodbyes, he decided to walk a little to clear his mind before heading home. The air was crisp, the city quiet. As he made his way through familiar backstreets, a sharp, muffled cry pierced the stillness. He stopped. The sound had come from a nearby alley, short, strained, unmistakably fearful. Kanté's instincts kicked in. He turned on his heel and jogged toward the noise, eyes scanning ahead. There, in the narrow alley, he saw the scene. An old woman lying on the wet cobblestone, clutching her bag while two young men tried to wrest it from her. One had already drawn a knife. The other was shouting at her to let go. "Hey!" Kanté's voice cut through the air like a blade. The two assailants froze and looked up. The one with the knife took a step forward, holding the blade out in warning. "This doesn't concern you," the taller one growled. Kanté moved forward slowly, unshaken. He wasn't big or imposing, but the intensity in his eyes made both attackers hesitate. "Leave her," he said, calmly but firmly. The shorter one scoffed and yanked the bag harder. Madame Fournier let out a desperate cry. In a flash, Kanté acted. A swift kick knocked the knife from the taller one's hand, the blade clattering to the ground. Before the young man could react, Kanté landed a solid blow to his stomach and then another to his jaw, sending him crashing unconscious against the wall. The second assailant turned to run, but Kanté intercepted him with ease. He grabbed the young man by the hoodie and slammed him against the brick with enough force to stun him. "It's over," Kanté said through gritted teeth. The old woman, still on the ground, stared wide-eyed at her unexpected protector. Her hands trembled, both from shock and cold. Kanté crouched beside her and spoke gently. "You're safe now. They won't hurt you." She nodded, unable to speak, tears streaking down her cheeks. Kanté picked up her handbag, checked to make sure nothing had been taken, and handed it back to her with care. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible. He stood between her and the stunned attackers and called the police. Until they arrived, he didn't move an inch, a quiet, immovable force standing guard over a stranger. The rain continued to fall, but in that alleyway, time seemed to hold its breath. A few minutes later, flashing blue lights bathed the narrow alley in a surreal glow. A police car pulled up, and two officers stepped out quickly, tense at first, until they recognized who was standing there. N'Golo Kanté, steady and calm, holding one young man against the wall, while another lay groaning on the ground. "Mr. Kanté?" one of them asked, incredulous. "Everything all right here?" "They tried to mug this woman," Kanté replied, gesturing toward Madame Fournier, who sat trembling near the curb. "One of them had a knife. I stopped them before it got worse." The officers took control of the scene, securing the knife and restraining the suspects. One of them helped Madame Fournier to her feet and wrapped her in a foil blanket from the car. She clutched her bag, still shaken, but her eyes followed Kanté as if afraid he might vanish the moment she looked away. "He saved me," she murmured. "He was just there, out of nowhere, like an angel." Once the statements were taken and the assailants loaded into the squad car, Kanté offered to walk Madame Fournier home. She hesitated, unsure whether to accept, then nodded silently. As they walked through the rain-slicked streets, she leaned slightly on his arm. Neither spoke at first. After a while, she glanced up at him. "You're him, aren't you? The footballer?" He gave a humble smile. "Yes, ma'am. N'Golo." "I never thought my life would be saved by someone I once saw win a World Cup," she said, her voice softening with a touch of humor. Kanté chuckled. "I've been in a few tough matches, but today was different." They arrived at her building, an old walk-up with iron railings and faded shutters. Kanté helped her climb the creaky stairs to the third floor and waited patiently as she unlocked her door. Inside, her apartment was cozy and filled with warmth. There were old family photos on every wall, the scent of lavender and old wood filling the air. "Please, sit. Let me make you some tea," she said. "It's the least I can do." Kanté tried to decline, but she insisted. He took a seat on the worn couch as she disappeared into the small kitchen. He noticed a black and white photo of a man in uniform, a soldier, on the mantel. "That was my husband," she said when she returned with a tray. "He died many years ago. But you remind me of him. Brave. Steady." Kanté accepted the tea, humbled by the comparison. "You know," she continued, "I'm not angry at those boys. I'm sad for them. No one becomes that lost overnight." Kanté nodded. "I was thinking the same. That look in their eyes. It was more than violence, it was desperation." That night, after he left her safely in her home, Kanté couldn't shake the encounter. He thought of the boys, not as criminals, but as kids who had fallen through the cracks. He had grown up in similar places, had seen how easy it was to fall into trouble when no one believed in you. The next day, he visited the youth center where he volunteered. He sat down with the director and laid out a new idea. "I want to build something more than a training space. I want a place where kids like those two can find something better before it's too late. Mentors, classes, support, structure, a program that gives them a real shot." The director, surprised but inspired, agreed to support the idea. With Kanté's backing, they began drawing up plans for what would become the Hope Initiative, a center aimed at preventing youth violence by providing education, sports, and emotional support. Ironically, the first two names on the intake list were Jean and Malik, the very boys who had attacked Madame Fournier. Because they were minors, and thanks to Kanté's intervention, a judge agreed to assign them to the new program instead of a juvenile detention center. When they arrived, they were defensive, cold, and barely cooperative. Jean crossed his arms at every session, while Malik rarely spoke at all. Most thought they would drop out or get expelled within weeks. But Kanté treated them like any other youth. He didn't talk about the past, didn't bring up the alley or the knife. He coached them like he did everyone else, firm but fair. He made them run laps, do drills, attend tutoring sessions. Slowly, something changed. One afternoon, Jean stayed after practice. He stood by the field, silent. Kanté approached him. "You've been working harder lately," Kanté said. Jean nodded. She came to the center, the old woman. Kanté raised his eyebrows. "She brought cake, said we deserved second chances. I don't get it. I don't deserve that kind of kindness." Kanté looked him in the eye. "Maybe not, but you're getting it anyway. What you do with it, that's what matters now." Jean began showing up early, helping with younger kids, studying late. Malik, seeing the change in his friend, began to open up too. The two boys who had once threatened a helpless woman were now starting to guide others away from the same mistakes. And Madame Fournier, kind and stubborn as ever, became a fixture at the center. She hosted storytelling circles, taught baking classes, and insisted on hugging every single participant who walked through the doors. The community began to notice. The neighborhood grew safer, more vibrant. Local businesses donated equipment. Other footballers visited. The media started picking up the story, but Kanté always kept the spotlight on the youth. "This isn't about me," he told a reporter once. "It's about what happens when people are seen, when someone believes in them." What had started as a simple act in a rainy alley had become something far bigger, a movement, a message, and a legacy in the making, and it was only the beginning. Over the following years, the Hope Initiative grew from a humble community project into a nationally recognized model of transformation. What began with a single act of bravery in a narrow Parisian alley had sparked a movement that changed lives, not through fame or fortune, but through consistency, compassion, and belief in the overlooked. Jean, once a street-hardened teenager with a knife in his hand, became a full-time youth mentor. He led training sessions, organized community cleanups, and gave talks in schools about the power of choice. The story of his attempted robbery, and the woman who forgave him, became a powerful message he shared with honesty. Malik found his calling behind the camera. Photography had helped him process the pain and anger of his youth, and now he taught others to use the lens as a tool for healing. His exhibit, Through Their Eyes, showcased the raw humanity of life in the city's forgotten corners. It traveled to galleries across France, drawing attention to the beauty and struggle behind every troubled face. Madame Fournier, affectionately known to all as Mémé Louise, remained at the center of it all. She visited the initiative weekly, even as her steps slowed and her hair turned fully silver. Her presence grounded the space, reminding everyone, staff, youth, and visitors alike, that kindness is not weakness, it's strength, and sometimes it's revolutionary. One crisp autumn day, Kanté stood before a modest crowd gathered in front of the newly renovated Hope Initiative building. A plaque was being unveiled on the wall, engraved in bronze and framed by ivy. It read, "In honor of Louise Fournier, whose courage, forgiveness, and unwavering belief in change gave rise to this place of light." Kanté stepped back, eyes misting. Jean stood beside him, holding back tears. Around them, dozens of young people cheered and applauded. Madame Fournier sat quietly in her wheelchair, a soft smile on her face, clutching a blanket hand-knitted by the girls in the center. Later that night, Kanté visited her at home. They sat in the same cozy living room where they'd once shared tea after the attack. The same photos were on the walls, but now new ones had been added. A group of smiling teens, Malik in front of his gallery, Jean giving a speech, and one of Kanté himself, arms around both boys at the football field. "You've given them a future," she said softly. He shook his head. "No, you gave us the beginning. I just followed the path." She chuckled. "You ran down that path like you were chasing a ball at the World Cup." They both laughed. It was the last evening they would share in that room. Madame Fournier passed away peacefully a few weeks later, in her sleep. The entire community mourned. Her funeral was standing room only, youth from the center, neighbors, officials, even strangers who had only heard her story. Kanté gave a eulogy, brief and heartfelt. She taught us that forgiveness is more powerful than punishment, that choosing to help can echo far beyond what we see. We honor her not by mourning, but by continuing what she helped us build. In her memory, the initiative expanded into other cities. Each new branch bore her name, Maison Fournier. Jean oversaw national operations. Malik produced documentaries that inspired change. And Kanté, though retired from football, remained the heart of it all. Years later, a young boy entering the Paris Center for the first time would ask, "Who is Madame Fournier?" And a mentor would answer, "She was the reason we're all here. Because one day, when she could have chosen fear, she chose grace. And one man chose to act." At the front of the original building, beneath the plaque, another inscription was added. Carved in stone, simple and eternal, "Hope begins with a choice."